The night carried a kind of quiet that only Christmas could bring, the kind that wrapped itself around the streets like a soft blanket, muffling the world until even sorrow seemed to whisper instead of cry. Snow lay in thin, hesitant patches along the sidewalks, not enough to make the city magical, just enough to remind everyone that winter had arrived and was not in a forgiving mood. Streetlights flickered with tired halos, and in the distance, someone's radio played a carol that sounded older than memory itself. It was on a street like this, forgotten by celebration and overlooked by joy, that a small house stood with only one dim light glowing inside. Inside that house, a widow sat on the edge of a worn sofa, her coat still on because the heater had given up hours earlier. She had learned to conserve warmth the way others conserved money. Her breath fogged faintly as she exhaled, and her hands rested around a chipped mug that no longer held anything warm. The children were nearby, pretending not to be hungry, pretending not to be afraid of the night pressing against the windows. One was tracing shapes on the frost gathering at the glass, the other holding a toy missing one wheel, rolling it back and forth as if repetition might make the world feel stable again. Christmas had come, but it had not brought the things it used to. No tree stood in the corner, no lights blinked in rhythm, no laughter drifted through the rooms. Only silence and the low hum of endurance remained. She told herself she was strong. She had been strong since the day grief first knocked on her door and refused to leave. Strength had become routine, almost automatic, like breathing. But tonight, strength felt heavier than usual, and hope felt like something meant for other people. Outside, footsteps crunched softly against the cold ground. They were slow, deliberate, not hurried by celebration or obligation. The man walking that path had learned long ago how to move without noise, how to read spaces before entering them, how to notice what others overlooked. Years of discipline still lived in his posture, though his clothes were ordinary now, his shoulders carrying no insignia, no rank, no visible past. He had been walking without a destination, letting memory guide him more than intention, when he noticed the single light in the window. He paused, not out of curiosity, but recognition. There was a certain loneliness that could be seen even from the outside, a particular stillness that spoke louder than laughter ever could. He had seen it before in places far from this quiet street, in eyes that had learned to survive too early. He told himself to keep walking. He told himself it wasn't his place, but something older than thought pulled him closer, something rooted in a promise he once made to himself when the world had been louder and far more violent. The knock was gentle, almost hesitant, as if the door itself might be tired. Inside, the widow stiffened. No one visited anymore. Visitors meant questions, expectations, sometimes pity. She stood slowly, her heart measuring each step. When she opened the door, cold air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of snow and something else, calm, steady, unfamiliar. He stood there with empty hands and a quiet expression, not smiling, not frowning, just present. His eyes moved briefly past her shoulder, not in intrusion but in understanding. He seemed to take in the room without judgment, the thinness of warmth, the way the children froze when they saw a stranger. He spoke softly, as though volume itself could be a burden. "I saw the light," he said, his voice low and even, carrying no demand. "Didn't want to pass by without checking." She almost laughed at the simplicity of it. People didn't check anymore. Not really. They assumed. They judged. They hurried on. She tightened her grip on the doorframe, unsure whether to close it or step aside. "It's Christmas," she said, as if that explained everything. He nodded slowly. "That's why I stopped." Silence stretched between them, not awkward, just careful. The children watched from behind her, eyes wide, but curious. The air felt different now, less heavy, as though the night had leaned in to listen. She realized she was tired of being brave alone, not weak, just tired. "I don't want to intrude," he said after a moment. But you shouldn't be alone tonight. None of you should. There was no pity in his tone, no savior's pride, just a statement, calm and steady, like a fact of nature. The kind of voice that didn't push, didn't beg, but somehow made space. She hesitated, every instinct trained by hardship warning her to be careful. Yet another instinct, older, quieter, whispered that sometimes help didn't arrive wrapped in certainty. Sometimes it came looking ordinary, standing on your doorstep with cold air at its back. The children edged closer to her, drawn by something they couldn't name. The younger one tugged lightly at her sleeve. "Mama," she whispered, "he looks nice." The man's eyes softened, just for a moment, as if something inside him recognized the sound of that word and the weight it carried. He crouched slightly, lowering himself to their level without stepping inside. "I don't have much," he said, "but I've got warmth, and I've got food, and I've got a place where the night doesn't feel so heavy. You don't have to decide anything now. Just come with me, just for a little while." The words hung in the air, fragile and bold all at once. Come with me, not a command, not a rescue, an invitation. She searched his face for deception, for danger, for anything that might betray regret. What she found instead was familiarity, an understanding of loss that didn't need explanation, someone who knew what it meant to carry ghosts and still keep walking. Her heart pounded, not with fear but with the weight of choice. The children were watching her now, trusting her to know what was safe, what was right. She thought of the cold floors, the empty cupboards, the long night ahead. She thought of how strength sometimes meant accepting help instead of refusing it. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. The relief that crossed his face was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. He stood and stepped back, giving her space, giving her control. He didn't rush her. He waited as she gathered a few things, wrapped the children in their coats, and turned off the light that had been burning alone against the dark. When she stepped outside, the cold bit sharply, but something else warmed her from within, a fragile thread of hope, newly awakened. The street seemed less empty now, the night less cruel. As they walked, the man adjusted his pace to match theirs, never rushing, never lagging behind. Snow crunched beneath their steps in a quiet rhythm, like a heartbeat finding its tempo again. They walked past houses filled with laughter, past windows glowing with celebrations that felt distant but no longer unreachable. The children began to talk, softly at first, then with growing curiosity, asking small questions about where they were going, about whether there would be lights, about whether it would be warm. He answered simply, honestly, never promising more than he could give. The road curved gently, leading them away from isolation and toward something. Unnamed, but steady. The widow felt a strange sensation blooming in her chest. Not joy, not yet, but the absence of despair. It was like stepping out of a storm and realizing the rain had stopped without her noticing. As they walked, she wondered how a stranger could feel so familiar, how safety could arrive without ceremony. She wondered if kindness had simply been waiting for her to look up. The night seemed to listen, the stars faint but present, as though even the sky had paused to witness this small, quiet crossing from loneliness toward something kinder. The house they approached was modest, warm lights spilling from its windows like an open invitation. The smell of something cooking drifted into the cold air, rich and comforting. The children inhaled deeply, their steps quickening without realizing it. She felt her chest tighten, emotion rising like a tide she had held back for too long. He stopped at the door and turned to her, giving her one last moment of choice, one last chance to turn back if fear demanded it. His voice was gentle when he spoke again, carrying a promise without ever naming it. "You're safe here," he said softly. "All of you are." And as she looked at the door, at her children, at the quiet strength in the man beside her, she felt something shift deep inside. A loosening, a surrender, not to weakness, but to grace. She stepped forward, crossing a threshold that was far more than wood and stone. stepping into a moment that would echo far beyond this night, far beyond the cold, far beyond the silence she had grown used to. And just as the door opened and warmth rushed out to meet them, she felt the weight of the past begin to lift, even as the future waited, unwritten, breathing softly, ready to unfold in ways she could not yet imagine, because what she did not know yet was that this single step would ripple outward, changing not only where they would sleep that night, but how every tomorrow would slowly begin to reshape itself, moment by moment, kindness by kindness, until the meaning of family, safety, and hope would be rewritten in ways none of them could yet see. And as the door eased wider and the light touched her face, she felt her heart opening to the possibility that this night was not an ending at all, but the quiet beginning of something that would grow and grow and grow, long after the snow melted and the season passed, carrying them forward into a story still unfolding, one gentle step at a time, as the warmth wrapped around them and the world outside waited, hushed, for what would come next.